You don't have to shout to be at war. Sometimes all you have to do is silence your own will. From an early age, we learn that avoiding conflict is a sign of maturity, that it is best to be calm, flexible, and peaceful. But Nietzsche was already suspicious of this softness. Excessive diplomacy often hides fear. Fear of losing, fear of exposing oneself, fear of being who one really is. Avoiding confrontation has become a cultural habit. We avoid difficult conversations with friends, swallow discomfort at work, smile at people who hurt us, all in the name of getting along. But at some point, this strategy becomes self-sabotage. Nietzsche saw the world as a field of forces in constant conflict, and those who avoid tension are not choosing peace. They are erasing themselves, because avoiding external conflict is often avoiding the internal conflict it causes. And without that friction, there is no growth, there is no truth, there is no freedom. Avoiding conflict is betraying yourself in silence. It is saying yes on the outside and no on the inside. It is sacrificing your own will in the name of others' acceptance. The irony is brutal. The desire to please, to avoid confrontation, stems from the search for security. But this same security shackles us. It prevents us from being whole. Because where there is fear of confrontation, there is disguised submission. Do you want to be free? Then you need to start here. Accept that freedom comes at a price, and that price is almost always the discomfort of facing up to things, facing expectations, facing disapproval, facing yourself. Human beings grow at the edges of what is uncomfortable, and running away from conflict means moving away from your own limits of expansion. Now let's explore why the idea of constant peace is a trap, and how it has silenced your potential without you even realizing it. Total peace is an illusion, and those who believe in it become weak. We live in an era obsessed with balance. Books, gurus, and lectures repeat that we should avoid negative energy, keep our vibrations high, and live in peace with everyone. It sounds nice, but deep down, it's a veiled request for you to numb yourself, to cut off parts of yourself in the name of forced harmony. Nietzsche hated this anesthesia. He believed that chaos is an essential part of existence, and that trying to live without friction is a cowardly denial of life itself. Because real life is tension, it is conflict, it is contrast. Without it, you don't transform, you don't evolve, you don't break the shells that hold you back. Permanent peace is a childish ideal. It's good for self-help manuals, not for those who want to be whole. There is a stark difference between emotional maturity and emotional cowardice. Maturity sees tension as part of the process. Cowardice, disguised as positivity, shies away from any friction and hides behind cliches. But here's the problem. By running away from conflict to maintain peace, you give up your truth. You become predictable, bland, molded by others. It is a peace that paralyzes, that takes away your strength, that makes you pleasant but irrelevant. Nietzsche proposed the opposite. Don't run away from tension. Use it. True harmony is not found in the absence of conflict, but in its integration. Chaos is part of the journey. It shapes character, reveals intentions, filters relationships. The idea of always living in peace is an elegant prison. You think you are evolving when in fact you are just conforming, staying shallow so as not to rock the boat. And those who don't rock the boat don't change anything. Want freedom? Then abandon your obsession with stability. Life is not a permanent calm. It is a sequence of storms, and freedom lies in learning to navigate them, not in avoiding them. Everything good is born of conflict. Nietzsche not only believed this, he lived it. For him, existence was a constant battle between forces, and running away from that battle was tantamount to betraying one's own life. The philosopher saw the world as a stage of creative tension. Where there is friction, there is movement. Where there is movement, there is transformation. And where there is transformation, there is freedom. Nietzsche did not romanticize suffering, but he accepted it as an inevitable part of the growth process. For him, pain was not punishment. It was training, a character builder, a brutal test of authenticity. He called this the will to power, the vital force that drives human beings to surpass themselves. And this force does not flourish in comfort zones. It needs conflict, challenge, confrontation with others, and with oneself. Conflict for Nietzsche was not gratuitous destruction. It was refinement. It was the struggle that reveals the real value of an idea, a belief, a will. Those who avoid conflict, according to him, are not being peaceful. They are being weak. They are denying their own power. The figure of the free spirit in Nietzsche is precisely someone who does not fear conflict, who breaks with inherited opinions, who questions moral standards, who faces the weight of freedom with courage, even if it makes them lonely, misunderstood, or rejected. Nietzsche saw human beings as unfinished works, and conflict was the chisel that sculpted these works. Without it, the individual became an incomplete draft, tamed by social norms and external expectations. That is why, for Nietzsche, avoiding conflict was abdicating one's own evolution. It was choosing to be static in a world that demands movement. It was denying one's own nature, and with that, never achieving real freedom. The most honest mirror is friction with others, because it is only in conflict that you discover what you really carry inside. Most people only know themselves in calm times. They think they are kind because no one has challenged them. They think they are strong because they have never been tested. But the truth appears in chaos, and chaos almost always comes disguised as conflict. Nietzsche knew this. For him, the clash with the world was not just social, it was existential. Because every time you face someone, you also confront yourself. Your beliefs, your limits, your masks. All of this is put to the test when tension arises. You think you are patient until someone humiliates you. You think you are free until you are pressured to obey. You think you are honest until the temptation of convenience strikes. Only in real conflict do these illusions break down. Conflict forces you to take a stand, and every stand is a choice. One that reveals priorities, values, fears. When you defend an idea under attack, it ceases to be merely theoretical. It becomes part of who you are. This is the hidden power of confrontation. It separates what is yours from what is inherited, what you truly believe from what you merely repeat. And this separation is painful, but liberating, because in it, you stop living on autopilot and start acting with intention. Nietzsche challenges us to accept this process as part of conscious life. He knew that conflict not only reveals, it builds. It is in the clash that you discover dormant strengths, uncomfortable truths, and a rawer, more real identity. Avoiding conflict, then, is also avoiding encountering yourself. It is choosing to live a reduced version of your own consciousness. And those who want freedom must have the courage to see themselves brutally. You can't be free without knowing who you are. And you can't know who you are without going through the tension of confrontation. Now it's time to unmask one of the greatest modern illusions, the figure of the good guy, and how it has been used as a shield for cowardice disguised as virtue. Not everyone who is kind is virtuous. Many are just well-trained cowards. Society loves the good guys, people who don't cause trouble, who agree with everything, who mold themselves to their environment. These are the ones who get promoted, praised, invited into all circles. But Nietzsche would look at them with suspicion and perhaps contempt, because behind excessive kindness, there is almost always something darker. Fear. Fear of displeasing others, fear of taking a stand, fear of being rejected. The good guy is often an accomplice to the status quo. He does not question, challenge, or disturb. He lives to please, and in the process, he nullifies himself. Their calm appearance hides a fragile ego desperate for approval. Nietzsche saw this type of behavior as the victory of herd morality, one that values submission, obedience, passivity, not because they are noble, but because they are useful for maintaining order. The nice guy becomes an instrument of this morality, an agent of collective mediocrity. But here's the provocation. True goodness is active, not submissive. It requires courage. It requires saying no when everyone else says yes. It requires confrontation, if necessary, to defend what is right. Being good is not being harmless. It is having power and deciding to use it consciously. The figure of the modern good guy reverses this. He prides himself on being harmless. But Nietzsche would say, if you are incapable of doing harm, your goodness has no merit. It is just impotence disguised as virtue. That is why excessive kindness needs to be investigated. In many cases, it reveals a silent pact with cowardice. The person does not take a stand. does not impose limits, does not reveal themselves, all to preserve superficial peace. But, as we have seen before, this peace is a prison, and the good guy is a prisoner who has learned to smile inside his cell. Do you want to be free? Then you need to learn to say no, and bear the weight that comes with it. Freedom is not a state of tranquility. It is a field of constant tension between what you want, what the world demands, and what you decide to uphold. And that tension hurts, because every authentic choice breaks with expectations, confronts norms, displeases someone. Nietzsche understood this viscerally. For him, true freedom is not in doing what you want. It is in becoming worthy of your own desires. And that only happens when you stand by your decisions in the face of pressure, when you choose friction over conformity. Friction is everything that forces you to take a stand. It's the dirty look you get when you break a rule. It's the tense silence after a firm statement. It's the subtle exclusion for not going with the flow. And that's exactly where freedom begins. Because freedom is not the absence of resistance, no, it's the ability to sustain it. Those who live trying to avoid discomfort are not free. They are conditioned to please, to give in, to ask permission to exist. Nietzsche invites us to a wilder freedom, not the freedom of slogans or self-help t-shirts, but raw freedom, born from friction with the world. Freedom that requires sacrifice, inner strength, and above all, an identity built on friction, not acceptance. Society rewards those who adapt, but the free don't adapt. They create tension, they create discomfort, they generate noise, they force questioning, and that's why they're dangerous. Friction is a sign that you're moving off script, that you're making choices that are uncomfortable, because they're yours. Those who want to live in peace with everyone end up at war with themselves. Those who want to please everyone end up controlled by everyone. Accept friction, not as a problem, but as a thermometer. If it hurts, maybe you're finally breaking free. Being true to yourself is easy, until someone looks at you funny. The real test begins when you stand up for who you are, even when you're misunderstood. Nietzsche didn't want applause. He wanted authenticity. And he knew that those who seek to be understood all the time are molding themselves, not freeing themselves. Because being understood by everyone requires concessions. It requires softening ideas, moderating speech, editing truths. Real freedom is antisocial by nature. It challenges standards, confronts collective beliefs, and disturbs comfort structures. That is why those who seek to free themselves must bear one of the most painful burdens, that of being misunderstood, that of being judged unfairly, distorted, rejected by those who cannot bear their raw truth. Nietzsche experienced this firsthand. He was ridiculed, ignored, attacked, all because he dared to think outside the box. But he accepted this loneliness as part of the journey, because for him, it was better to be misunderstood than falsely accepted. This is the courage that few have. The courage to be seen as arrogant when you are just being firm, to be called insensitive when you are just being honest, to be accused of being selfish when you are just saying enough. The truth is that the fear of being misunderstood imprisons us. You start to soften your desires, then your words, then your essence, and one day, you wake up unrecognizable, living an edited version of yourself just to avoid noise. But Nietzsche reminds us, noise is a sign of rupture, and every rupture is a step out of prison. To be free is to uphold your truth even when it isolates you. It is resisting the temptation to explain yourself all the time. It is accepting that some will never understand, and that's okay. The approval of others is not a sign of freedom. It is often proof that you have adapted too much. Not every confrontation is a sign of strength. Some just repeat the same prison, with more noise. There is a silent trap in today's world, thinking that every clash is empowerment, that shouting is asserting yourself, that challenging is always a sign of courage. Nietzsche would warn us, don't be fooled. Confrontation is only liberating when it comes from a place of inner clarity, not from an automatic reaction. There are two types of conflict. The first liberates. The second enslaves. The conflict that liberates is conscious. It is one in which you take a firm stand, but without losing your lucidity. It is driven by principle, not impulse. It brings you closer to your truth, even if it hurts. The conflict that enslaves, on the other hand, is reactive. It is noise without substance. It is shouting to assert a fragile ego. It is butting heads just to feel strong, but deep down, it is fear disguised as attitude. Nietzsche did not advocate gratuitous chaos. He saw confrontation as a tool, not a lifestyle. True conflict requires presence, it requires discernment. It is not an ego fight. It is an affirmation of essence. Are you arguing to free yourself or to control? Are you fighting to uphold a value or just to feel right? This distinction changes everything. Many people enter into conflict because of a lack. They want to be heard, recognized, validated, and they use confrontation as a stage for their internal drama. This type of confrontation is loud, but shallow. It seems courageous, but it is childish. In contrast, liberating confrontation is quietly powerful. It doesn't need an audience. It happens even when you just say no, and sustain that no with maturity. It is friction that does not seek to defeat the other, but to affirm oneself. Nietzsche valued the tension that transforms us, but he despised the empty repetition of conflicts that only reaffirm our own emotional slavery. Environments where there is never conflict are environments where no one is free. Harmonious companies, united families, peaceful couples. It sounds nice, but Nietzsche would be suspicious of all these scenarios. Because where there is absolute silence, there is censorship. Where no one disagrees, someone is nullifying themselves. And where everything seems peaceful, there is often only fear of confrontation. Nietzsche understood that authentic life requires friction. And that is why environments that repress any tension, in the name of good coexistence, end up stifling individual freedom. They impose a forced peace that kills critical thinking, blocks honest expression, and turns relationships into artificial showcases. How many times have you kept quiet to avoid drama? How many ideas have you failed to express so as not to cause discomfort? How many times have you pretended to agree just to maintain supposed peace? That is the price of peaceful coexistence. You disappear. Environments like this do not encourage maturity. They encourage conformity. And conformity is the antithesis of freedom. Nietzsche called this herd morality, a set of unspoken rules that keep everyone under control, smiling on the outside and frustrated on the inside. The appearance of harmony serves only to preserve status, fragile bonds, and the hierarchy of power. But this harmony comes at a high price. The death of authenticity. Where you can't question, you can't evolve. Where there's no room for conflict, there's no room for transformation. Where everything has to be light, no one can be whole. Free people create discomfort, not out of malice, but out of integrity. That is why truly mature environments are those that welcome conflict, not those that avoid it. They are places where confrontation is allowed, where disagreement is not a threat, but part of the real construction process. Nietzsche knew that freedom begins with the right to say what you think, even when it makes people uncomfortable. Environments that suppress this expression are not safe. They are decorated prisons. Avoiding conflict seems prudent, but in practice it is submission. Nietzsche knew this better than most. He saw the world divided between those who create and those who obey, and the dividing line between these two worlds is not talent or intelligence. It is the courage to face up to things, to face up to others, yes, but above all, to face up to yourself. Avoiding conflict is, in essence, abdicating freedom, because every impulse of authenticity that you repress, someone else defines for you. Every time you remain silent to keep the peace, someone speaks for you. Every time you say yes to avoid friction, someone walks with your legs. Every time you avoid confrontation, you reinforce the shackles that bind you. Nietzsche saw tension not as a problem, but as a test, a practical test of freedom, because there is no real freedom without the friction of choice. There is no autonomy without the weight of responsibility. There is no identity without the pain of rejection. Those who do not face up to things obey, even if they smile, even if they seem calm, even if they are at peace. And that is why all liberation begins with confrontation, first with the environment, then with others, and finally, with the parts of yourself that still want to please, to be accepted, to be good. Friction is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the gateway to a life where you stand up for what you think, what you feel, what you want. Nietzsche didn't want you to be rebellious out of vanity. He wanted you to be free out of conviction. And for that, there are no shortcuts. You will need to confront. You will need to be misunderstood. You will need to lose in order to win. But in the end, what you gain is priceless, because it is yours, your voice, your will, your life. Now I leave you with one final question. What in you is still silent? Just to avoid confrontation. If this content made sense to you, like the video. And if any part made you think differently, leave a comment. Your perspective matters.